The rain drummed against the windshield of Detective Jack Reeves's unmarked sedan as he stared at the yellow crime scene tape fluttering in the wind. Seattle in October was always miserable, but this evening felt particularly foreboding. 3 months, 5 bodies, and not a single solid lead. The press had already dubbed the killer the Nameless Monster, a theatrical moniker that Jack despised but secretly thought fitting. "You planning on sitting there all night, Doctor?" Claire Mitchell's voice crackled through his phone. The department's new criminal profiler had been assigned to the case last month, much to Jack's chagrin. At 35, she was young for her position, her prestigious FBI background doing little to impress a veteran detective who valued street smarts over academic credentials. "Just getting my head straight," Jack muttered, finally stepping out into the downpour. The body had been discovered in an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district, same signature as the others. Methodically positioned, specific mutilations, no DNA evidence. Inside the scene was a grotesque tableau. The victim, a woman in her 30s, lay on her back, arms crossed over her chest in a pose of repose that mocked the violence inflicted upon her. Jack's stomach clenched at the familiar staging. The killer was becoming more confident, more theatrical. "The cooling-off period is shortening," Claire observed, appearing beside him in full protective gear. 3 weeks between victims 1 and 2, then 19 days, 15, and now just 11. "I can count, Doctor," Jack snapped, then immediately regretted his tone. It wasn't her fault that this case was consuming him, that every victim reminded him of Sarah. 5 years ago, his partner had been murdered while they were investigating a series of home invasions. The case went cold, and Jack had spiraled into a pit of guilt and whiskey until Captain Reynolds had pulled him back with the promise of redemption. Now, as he stared at another victim of a killer he couldn't catch, that old familiar shame burned in his chest. "The symbolism is evolving," Claire continued, undeterred by his brusqueness. "The crossed arms, the cleaned wounds. He's caring for them after death. This isn't rage, it's ritual." "A fascinating psychological insight," Jack said dryly, "but it doesn't tell me who he is or where to find him." Claire's eyes flashed. "If you'd bothered to read my reports, you'd know I've narrowed the geographical profile. He's operating within a comfort zone that suggests intimate knowledge of South Seattle, probably lives or works in the area." The forensics team moved methodically around them, cataloguing evidence that Jack suspected would yield nothing. The Nameless Monster was meticulous, leaving behind scenes that were clinically clean, despite their brutality. "Detective Reeves," called out CSI lead Martinez, "you need to see this." Beneath the victim's carefully arranged hands was a folded piece of paper. Using tweezers, Martinez opened it to reveal a newspaper clipping, an article about the 3rd victim, with Jack's name circled in red. "He's watching you," Claire said quietly. "This is personal now." Back at the precinct, the war room walls were plastered with crime scene photos, timelines and maps, dotted with red pins marking victim locations. Jack stood before them, coffee gone cold in his hand, as Claire entered with an armful of files. "The captain wants an update in 20, she said, spreading her materials across the table, "and the press is camped outside demanding a statement." "Let them wait," Jack muttered. "We've got nothing to tell them." "Actually, we do." Claire pinned a new map to the board. "I've cross-referenced victim demographics with their last known locations. They're all women between 30 and 40, professional, single, living alone, and they all disappeared from within this 5-mile radius." Jack studied the map, recognizing the area around Pioneer Square. Historic buildings, upscale bars, art galleries. "That's a lot of ground to cover." "But it's a start," Claire insisted. "And there's more." All victims frequented cultural events, gallery openings, jazz clubs, literary readings. "Our killer has refined tastes." Jack's phone buzzed with a text from Reynolds. "Media briefing, now." The press conference was a feeding frenzy. Camera flashes blinded Jack as he stood uncomfortably at the podium, Reynolds beside him projecting calm authority. "We're pursuing all leads," the captain assured the reporters, his practiced political voice betraying none of the frustration Jack knew he felt. "Detective Reeves and Dr. Mitchell are our best people," a reporter shouted. "Is it true the killer has made contact with the investigation team?" Jack's jaw clenched. The leak had to have come from inside. "We cannot comment on specific evidence," Reynolds replied smoothly. Afterward, Jack cornered Claire in the hallway. "Someone's talking to the press." "And you think it's me?" Her eyes narrowed. "I've been profiling serial offenders for 7 years, detective. I don't compromise investigations." "I don't know what to think anymore," Jack admitted, "but I know we're missing something." That night, alone in his apartment overlooking Lake Union, Jack spread the case files across his kitchen table. Rain lashed against the windows as Seattle's skyline blurred into a smear of lights. A half-empty bottle of bourbon sat untouched beside him, a temptation he was resisting, barely. The victims stared back at him from their photographs, alive in driver's license photos, dead in crime scene documentation, all similar in appearance, dark-haired, successful, independent, like Sarah, like the life she never got to live. His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. "Reeves," he answered gruffly. "It's Claire. I've been reviewing the autopsy reports again, and there's a pattern we missed. All victims had trace amounts of a specific type of soil under their fingernails, soil containing a rare clay only found in certain parts of the Cascade foothills." Jack sat up straighter. "They were alive somewhere else before they were killed." "Exactly. He has a holding location. The warehouse was just the disposal site." For the first time in months, Jack felt a flicker of hope. As the rain continued to fall over a city gripped by fear, two strangers, forced together by circumstance, began to forge something resembling trust. The monster was still out there, watching, waiting, but now they had something tangible to hunt. What neither of them knew was that at that very moment, in a modest home in the foothills east of the city, a man was carefully selecting newspaper clippings, his next message to Detective Jack Reeves already taking shape in his methodical mind. The morning brought no respite from the rain, but Jack arrived at the precinct with renewed purpose. Claire was already there, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd slept as little as he had. "I've requested soil analysis from the state lab," she said without preamble. "They're expediting it, but it'll still take 48 hours. "We don't have 48 hours, Jack replied, pouring coffee for both of them. The gesture wasn't lost on Claire, who accepted the cup with a surprised nod of thanks. "Based on the accelerating timeline, I estimate we have 5 to 7 days before he takes another victim." She hesitated. "Jack, I found something else. In the newspaper clipping he left, the article mentioned your previous case." Jack froze. "Sarah's case?" "It was a brief reference to your background, but yes." The implication sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the Seattle weather. Was this connected to Sarah somehow? The thought seemed impossible. Her killer had been a random opportunist, not a calculating serial murderer. "I need to see the original files from Sarah's case," Claire said gently. Jack's immediate instinct was to refuse. Those files contained his failure, his greatest regret, but if there was even a remote chance of a connection, "I'll get them from archives," he conceded. The day unfolded in a flurry of activity. While waiting for the soil analysis, they re-interviewed witnesses from the first crime scenes, looking for details that might have been overlooked. Jack found himself watching Claire work, reluctantly impressed by her approach, compassionate but relentless, picking up on micro-expressions and verbal cues he would have missed. By late afternoon, they were back in the war room, adding new information to their timeline. The first 2 victims frequented the same coffee shop near Pike Place, Claire noted, and victim 4 attended the same yoga studio as victim 2. "Hunting grounds," Jack murmured. "He observes them, learns their routines." Claire nodded. "He's methodical, patient. These aren't crimes of opportunity. Each victim is specifically chosen. Captain Reynolds appeared in the doorway. We've got a problem. The Seattle Times is running a feature tomorrow, Inside the Hunt for the Nameless Monster. Jesus, Jack swore. How much are they revealing? Too much, Reynolds said grimly, including details about the newspaper clipping and the soil evidence. We need to change our strategy, Claire said firmly. If he knows we're looking at the soil, he might change his holding location. Or accelerate his timeline, Jack added, the thought making his stomach twist. We need to go public with a targeted appeal, use what we know about his psychology to provoke a response. Claire looked skeptical. That's risky. So is doing nothing while he grabs his next victim, Jack countered. The press conference was hastily arranged for the evening news cycle. Jack stood before the cameras, Claire beside him, as he delivered a carefully crafted statement. The individual responsible for these crimes believes himself to be sophisticated, cultured, Jack said directly into the cameras. But the evidence tells a different story. We're seeing the work of someone desperate for recognition, someone ordinary trying to appear exceptional. Claire had argued against this approach, concerned it might enrage the killer, but Jack was counting on that reaction. A furious killer might make mistakes. That night, as rain turned to mist over the city, Detective Amy Wong from Digital Forensics called. We've been monitoring dark web forums and social media for chatter about the case, she explained. After your press conference, something interesting popped up. A post on an obscure forum defending the killer's artistry and calling you specifically unworthy to judge his work. Can you trace it? Jack asked, suddenly alert. The user was careful, but not careful enough. We've narrowed the IP address to a neighborhood in Bellevue. Jack called Claire immediately, and within an hour they were gathered with a tactical team in a command center, preparing to investigate 3 possible locations. Remember, this is reconnaissance only, Captain Reynolds warned. We observe, we don't engage. The first location was a dead end, an unsecured coffee shop Wi-Fi that anyone could have used. The second, an apartment complex with too many potential units to narrow down without more information. The third location was a small art gallery in downtown Bellevue, closed for the night, but with lights visible in the upstairs office. Property records showed it was owned by a Martin Greaves, 42, no criminal record, art history degree from UW. Let's run him, Jack said, and Wong pulled up everything she could find. Greaves had an impeccable background, respected gallery owner, occasional lecturer at local universities, divorced 3 years ago. Nothing flagged him as suspicious until Claire noticed something in his exhibition history. His gallery featured shows for all 5 victims, she said quietly. They were artists or photographers. He knew them all. Jack felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with a solid lead. We need a warrant. Based on what? Reynolds challenged. An IP address and the fact that he knew the victims professionally? Any judge would throw that out. Then we need more, Jack insisted. Wong, dig deeper into Greaves. Financial records, property holdings, everything. Claire, review the victim profiles again. Look for any connection we missed. As the team dispersed, Claire pulled Jack aside. I went through Sarah's case files, she said. Her exhibition was scheduled at a gallery in Belltown 6 years ago. The curator was Martin Greaves. The world seemed to tilt beneath Jack's feet. That can't be coincidence. No, Claire agreed, but we need proof, not theories. Dawn was breaking over the Cascade Mountains when Wong returned with new information. Greaves owns a property in the foothills, inherited from his father, a cabin on 5 acres, very isolated. Where exactly? Claire asked sharply. Wong pulled up a geological survey map. Right in the area with that specific clay soil composition. Jack was already reaching for his jacket. Get the warrant. Now. As they prepared to move on the cabin, Jack found himself in the unusual position of feeling grateful for Claire's presence. She had connected dots he might never have seen, forging links between past and present that might finally bring him the closure he'd sought for 5 years. You know this could be dangerous, he told her, as they geared up. "Greaves has nothing to lose if he realizes we're onto him." "I've been in worse situations," she replied, checking her protective vest. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't do anything stupid." For the first time since they'd met, Jack smiled, a brief, genuine expression that transformed his weather-beaten face. "Let's go catch our monster." What they couldn't know, as they headed toward the foothills, was that Martin Greaves was already expecting company, and had been planning for this moment far longer than anyone could have imagined. The cabin stood in a small clearing, shrouded by towering Douglas firs that dripped with moisture from the overnight rain. On approach, it looked deceptively ordinary, a modest A-frame structure with a stone chimney, smoke curling lazily into the grey morning sky. The tactical team moved with practiced precision, securing the perimeter while Jack, Claire, and Captain Reynolds established a command post just beyond the tree line. Satellite imagery had revealed a detached garage, and what appeared to be a storm cellar entrance on the north side of the property. "Heat signatures indicate one person inside the main structure," reported the tactical team leader. "No movement detected." Jack studied the cabin through binoculars, noting the carefully maintained exterior, the neatly stacked firewood, the absence of any clutter. "Everything in its place," he murmured. "Just like his crime scenes." Claire nodded. "Control is essential to his identity. This property will be immaculate inside and out." The warrant came through at 7:42 a.m. Within minutes, the tactical team was moving in, announcing their presence with standard protocol. The silence that followed was unnerving. "Martin Greaves!" called the team leader through a bullhorn. "This is the Seattle Police Department. We have a warrant to search these premises. Come out with your hands visible." Nothing. The team breached the front door, and Jack and Claire waited in tense silence for the all-clear. When it came, it was accompanied by confusion. "Detective Reeves, you need to see this," crackled the radio. Inside, the cabin was indeed immaculate and entirely ordinary. A living room with comfortable but unremarkable furniture, a kitchen with clean countertops and nothing out of place, a bedroom with a neatly made bed and books stacked on the nightstand. "There's no one here," said the team leader, "but the fireplace is still warm. He hasn't been gone long." Jack's instinct screamed warning. "Check the garage and the cellar," he ordered. The garage contained only a well-maintained Land Rover and typical tools, but when they approached the storm cellar, the atmosphere shifted. The heavy wooden doors were secured with a padlock that looked newer than the rest of the property. "Break it," Jack commanded. The cellar doors opened to reveal concrete steps descending into darkness. Flashlights illuminated a space that sent chills through even the most hardened officers. It was a studio, meticulously organized. One wall was covered in photographs, surveillance shots of all 5 victims, going about their daily lives, unaware they were being watched. Beside them were photos of Jack himself, leaving the precinct, standing at crime scenes, sitting alone in a bar. Another wall displayed what could only be described as artistic studies, sketches of the victims, both alive and in death poses. The third wall was blank, except for a single, large canvas covered with a black cloth. "Don't touch anything without gloves," Jack warned, though the forensics team was already processing the scene with professional detachment. Claire moved to the covered canvas, her expression grim. With gloved hands, she carefully lifted the cloth to reveal a portrait. Sarah, Jack's partner, painted with disturbing skill and detail. "Jack," she said softly. He stared at the painting, memories flooding back. Sarah's laugh, her fierce determination, her last words to him before she went to check that apartment alone. The painting captured her essence in a way that suggested intimate knowledge, observation over time. "He knew her," Jack said, his voice hollow. "This wasn't random." Claire pointed to a small table in the corner where a leather-bound journal lay open. "We need to read that." The journal contained meticulous entries dating back 7 years, detailing Greaves's thoughts on art, beauty, and mortality. The earliest entries focused on his growing obsession with Sarah, whom he'd met when curating her photography exhibition. She rejected his advances, Claire said, scanning the pages. Professionally at first, then personally when he persisted. He saw it as a betrayal of what he believed was their artistic connection. Jack's hands clenched into fists. He killed her because she turned him down? It's more complex than that, Claire replied. In his mind, she recognized his genius, but denied it out of professional jealousy. Her rejection triggered his first kill. The latest entries were more disturbing. Detailed observations of Jack, assessments of Claire after she joined the investigation, and plans for what he called his masterpiece. The last entry is from yesterday morning, Claire noted, turning to the final written page. The detective remains blind to the true meaning of my work. Tomorrow, I will make it impossible for him to ignore. Jack's phone rang. Amy Wong from Digital Forensics. We've been tracking Greaves's credit card activity, she said without preamble. He just used his card at a gas station in North Bend 20 minutes ago. He's running, Jack said. I don't think so, Claire countered, still studying the journal. North Bend is deeper into the mountains, not toward any major highways or airports. There's something else, Wong continued. We found property records for Greaves's father. Before he owned this cabin, he had another property near North Bend, an old hunting lodge. It was officially sold 15 years ago, but the transaction looks suspicious. The buyer was a shell company that traces back to a law firm Greaves uses. Jack was already moving toward the stairs. Get me the coordinates, and tell Reynolds we need backup at that location immediately. The drive to North Bend was tense, the winding mountain road slick with rain. Claire sat beside Jack in the passenger seat, reviewing everything they knew about Greaves. He's escalating toward his endgame, she said. The journal entries suggest he sees this as the culmination of a grand artistic statement. You're central to it, Jack. He's been planning this for years. Why the other victims? Jack asked, hands tight on the steering wheel as they navigated a particularly sharp curve. Practice, Claire said grimly, and message sending. Each victim shared characteristics with Sarah, and each crime scene contained subtle references to you that we missed until now. He was building toward this moment. The hunting lodge was more remote than the cabin, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that threatened to swallow their vehicle in mud. They were forced to continue the last quarter mile on foot, with backup still 15 minutes behind them. We should wait, Claire argued, but Jack was already checking his weapon. If Greaves is here with another victim, we don't have time to wait, he countered. The lodge loomed ahead, larger than Jack had expected, a rustic two-story structure with a wide porch and multiple outbuildings. No vehicles were visible, but smoke rose from the chimney. We approach carefully, Jack said. Stay behind me. They moved silently across the clearing, taking cover behind a stack of firewood within view of the front windows. Through the glass they could see movement, a figure passing back and forth, preparing something. I see Greaves, Jack whispered, but no sign of a victim. Claire peered around him. The journal mentioned a basement. If he has someone, that's where they'd be. Jack weighed their options. Waiting for backup was the protocol, but every minute increased the risk to any potential victim. Decision made, he signaled for Claire to circle around to the back while he approached the front. The porch steps creaked beneath his weight despite his careful tread. Gun drawn, he positioned himself beside the front door, took a deep breath, and knocked forcefully. Seattle PD! Martin Greaves, open up! Silence, then footsteps approaching unhurriedly from within. The door opened to reveal Martin Greaves, a slender man in his early 40s with wire-rimmed glasses and an artist's paint-spattered apron. Detective Reeves, he said, as if greeting an expected dinner guest. You're earlier than I anticipated. I'm not quite ready. Hands where I can see them, Jack ordered, weapon trained on Greaves's chest. Is there anyone else in the house? Greaves smiled thinly. Not yet. Something in his tone made Jack's blood run cold. Step back slowly. Keep your hands visible. Greaves complied with unsettling calm, retreating into a large living area dominated by a stone fireplace and, more disturbingly, an array of paintings similar to those in the cellar studio. Jack followed, maintaining distance, aware that Claire would be entering from the rear of the lodge. "You've created quite the gallery," Jack said, buying time as he scanned the room for threats or signs of a victim. "My life's work," Greaves replied, "though the centerpiece is still to come." Jack noticed a door in the corner, presumably leading to the basement. "What's down there, Martin?" "The final canvas," Greaves said, his voice taking on a reverential quality. "I've prepared everything for years, since Sarah, really. She was the beginning, you know. The first time I understood what true art required." Jack struggled to maintain his professional demeanor. "You killed my partner." "I elevated her," Greaves corrected. "Immortalized her, just as I've done with the others, just as I intend to do with you, detective." The revelation struck Jack like a physical blow. Greaves hadn't been hunting another victim. He'd been waiting for Jack. Before he could respond, Claire appeared in the kitchen doorway, her weapon trained on Greaves. "FBI, don't move!" Greaves' expression changed from calm to animated. "Dr. Mitchell, perfect timing, the psychological element, the observer. Every masterpiece needs a witness." "It's over, Martin," Claire said firmly. "There's no way out." "Out?" Greaves laughed softly. "I'm not trying to escape. This is the culmination, the moment when Detective Reeves finally understands my work." Jack heard sirens in the distance. Backup was close. But something felt wrong. Greaves was too composed, too satisfied. "What have you done?" Jack demanded. Greaves glanced at his watch. "Created the perfect scenario. The obsessive detective, haunted by his past. The brilliant profiler, drawn into his dangerous quest. The artist, misunderstood and hunted. And now, the cleansing fire that will transform us all into legend." The smell hit Jack then. Gasoline, masked until now by the scent of burning wood from the fireplace. The floors, the walls, the furniture, all had been methodically prepared. "He's rigged the place," Jack warned Claire. "We need to get out. Now!" Greaves smiled and reached into his pocket, producing a small remote detonator. "Art requires sacrifice, detective." Sarah understood that in the end. Outside, the first police vehicles were arriving, officers pouring from cars, unaware of the danger. In that moment, Jack saw with perfect clarity what Greaves had planned, the dramatic conclusion to his twisted narrative, with all of them as unwitting performers in his final exhibition. Time seemed to slow as Jack made his choice. Not the ending Greaves had scripted, not another failure he couldn't live with. As Greaves' thumb moved toward the detonator, Jack lunged forward. The world exploded into chaos. Jack collided with Greaves just as the man's thumb made contact with the detonator. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs, the remote skittering across the wooden planks. Somewhere in the lodge, a muffled explosion sent tremors through the structure, but not the inferno Greaves had planned. "Get out!" Jack shouted to Claire. "Tell them to fall back!" Claire hesitated for only a moment before running toward the front door, already radioing warnings to the approaching tactical team. Greaves fought with unexpected strength, his refined exterior masking a wiry resilience. His eyes, previously calm and detached, now burned with fury as his carefully orchestrated finale unraveled. "You don't understand," he hissed, clawing at Jack's face. "It has to end this way." Jack pinned him with a knee to the chest, securing his wrists. "The only thing ending today is your killing spree." Smoke began to fill the room. The initial explosion had ignited something, though not with the devastating force Greaves had intended. The air grew thick as Jack hauled the struggling man to his feet. "Move!" he ordered, pushing Greaves toward the door. Outside, organized chaos reigned. Officers had established a perimeter, and fire trucks were arriving, their sirens wailing through the mountain air. Claire stood with Captain Reynolds, pointing toward the lodge's southern wing, where flames were now visible. Jack shoved Greaves toward the nearest officers. "Secure him. He's rigged explosives throughout the building." As Greaves was handcuffed and led away, he called back over his shoulder, "It's not finished, Detective. The story isn't complete." The fire crews moved in with practiced efficiency, battling the blaze that threatened to consume the lodge. Jack found himself beside Claire, both of them watching as Greaves was placed in a patrol car. "You okay?" she asked, noting the scratches on his face and the torn sleeve of his jacket. "Been better," he admitted. "You?" "Processing," she replied with grim humor. "Not every day you discover you are cast in a psychopath's performance art." Reynolds approached, his expression severe. "The fire chief says there are accelerants throughout the building. If all the charges had detonated as planned, we'd be recovering bodies instead of evidence," Jack finished. "Speaking of evidence," Reynolds continued, "the bomb squad found something in the basement. You both need to see this." After the fire was contained and the structure declared stable enough for investigation, Jack and Claire followed Reynolds down the partially damaged stairs to the lodge's basement. The space had been converted into an elaborate studio that made the cellar at the cabin look primitive by comparison. The center of the room was dominated by a large installation, a recreation of Sarah's crime scene, meticulously detailed, surrounded by similar tableaux representing each of the 5 subsequent victims. Along the walls, hundreds of photographs chronicled Jack's investigation over the years, interspersed with intimate images of Sarah that could only have been taken by someone she trusted. "He was obsessed with both of you," Claire said quietly. "Sarah rejected him professionally, but in his mind, you rejected his art by failing to see the connections between the cases." Jack moved through the grotesque gallery, stomach churning at the realization that Greaves had been watching him for years, cataloguing his grief, his struggles with alcohol, his professional setbacks and small victories. In one corner stood a newer installation, materials gathered for what would have been Jack's own tableau. A police uniform, case files, personal items that must have been stolen from his apartment. "This was never about getting away with murder," Jack said, the full picture finally coming into focus. "It was about creating a narrative where he was the misunderstood genius and I was the flawed hero who ultimately fails. And when you caught him instead of dying in his staged finale, you ruined his story," Claire added. Reynolds gestured to a forensics technician who handed him a sealed evidence bag containing a USB drive. "Found this on his workstation, labeled Confession." Back at the precinct, the 3 of them watched as Greaves's video played on a secure computer. The man spoke directly to camera, calm and articulate, as he detailed each murder, beginning with Sarah. "I offered her immortality through my work," Greaves explained on screen. "She saw only a curator overstepping his bounds. Her rejection was the catalyst for my true artistic awakening." He described how he had stalked Sarah for weeks, learning her routines, her security protocols, how he had staged the home invasion to misdirect the investigation, how he had watched Jack fall apart afterward, documenting his decline with the same meticulous attention he gave to his victims. Each subsequent subject was chosen for their resonance with the original, Greaves continued. Each death a refinement of technique, a chapter in the narrative leading to the inevitable conclusion. The video ended with Greaves staring into the camera, a small smile playing at his lips. "By the time you see this, Detective Reeves, our story will have reached its proper conclusion. History will remember us both." Jack closed the laptop, emotionally exhausted but also experiencing a strange sense of closure. "He gave us everything we need for prosecution. And closure for the victims' families," Claire added. The investigation continued for weeks. Forensic teams processed both properties, recovering evidence that linked Greaves conclusively to all 6 murders. His detailed records provided answers to questions that had haunted families for years. For Jack, the most difficult moment came when he had to view the evidence recovered from Sarah's case. Photographs Greaves had taken of her in life, journals detailing his growing obsession, the trophy items he had kept. "She never mentioned him to me," Jack told Claire as they sat in his office one evening reviewing files, not as anything more than the curator working on her exhibition. Stalkers often exist on the periphery, Claire explained. They create connections in their minds that the objects of their obsession aren't aware of. Jack nodded, fingering the sobriety chip in his pocket. 6 years now, with a brief relapse after Sarah's death that he'd fought hard to overcome. I always thought I failed her by not seeing something coming. Turns out there was nothing to see. You didn't fail her, Claire said firmly. And you didn't fail the other victims. You caught him. We caught him, Jack corrected. The trial was scheduled for spring. Greaves had refused a plea deal, insisting on his day in court, one final performance. Mental health evaluations found him competent, his meticulous planning evidence of his awareness of the criminality of his actions. On a rare sunny day in December, Jack stood at Sarah's grave, placing fresh flowers beside the headstone. Claire waited respectfully at a distance, having accompanied him at his request. He'd thought catching her killer would feel different, Jack admitted, as they walked back toward the cemetery gates. More cathartic, Claire suggested. Yeah, instead I just feel tired. Grief doesn't disappear with answers, she said. It just changes form. They reached Jack's car, pausing awkwardly in that space between professional colleagues and something more personal that they had yet to define. The department psychologist says I should take some time off, Jack said. Process everything, Claire nodded. Sounds wise. I was thinking of heading up to the Olympic Peninsula for a week. There's supposed to be good hiking, even this time of year. He hesitated, then added, You could come, if you wanted. The invitation surprised them both. Claire studied his face, seeing beyond the weathered exterior to the man who had carried his guilt and grief for so long. I'd like that, she said finally, but only if you promise one thing. What's that? No case files. No discussion of Greaves, just normal conversations. Jack smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes in a way she had rarely seen. I think I remember how to do that. Maybe. As they drove back toward the city, Seattle's skyline emerging from the mist ahead of them, Jack felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Not the closure he had expected, but the possibility of a future not defined entirely by the past. The nameless monster had a name now, a face, a story that would be told in courtrooms and criminology textbooks. But for Jack Reeves, the most important story was the one still unwritten, the chapters ahead that, for the first time in too long, he found himself looking forward to.